Hi and welcome to another Australian Game Changers news update. While many trucking operators are keen to embrace safer zero or low emission vehicles, they simply can't, as Australian out-of-date truck width rules are preventing the latest vehicle technology to enter the country's shores. The Australian Trucking Association wants local truck dimension restrictions to be overhauled as they're slowing the rollout of zero-emission trucks in Australia. The peak body has released a submission on heavy vehicle emission standards, calling on the Australian government to adopt 2.6 metre trucks and trailer widths. ATA CEO Andrew McKellar joins us in the studio to explain more. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us here this morning for a chat. Would you please explain how these restrictions have impacted the overall transport industry landscape over the last few years?
Well, currently in Australia we have a regulation relating to truck width which provides that the width of the vehicle can't exceed 2.5 metres, and that's been a unique regulation for Australia. It's different from what is applied in Europe and in the United States, two of the major markets in the world. So I think up until now, obviously we've had to conform to that regulation, but going forward, we do think that there will be significant advantages if Australia moves to a regulation which is much more closely aligned with the US regulation, which is 2.6 metres, and that would allow us to bring vehicles in from that market and from the European Union without having to restructure or redesign or reconfigure trucks to meet the Australian standard currently at 2.5 metres. Now, it's important going forward because increasingly we're going to see more zero and low emission vehicles, electric trucks coming into Australia, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles coming into Australia, and to accommodate these sorts of new technologies, new powertrain, then we're going to need to move to that larger width, and that will be much more efficient for the Australian market.
What is the current cost of these vehicles being restricted from the Australian market at the moment?
Well, on the figures that we've seen from a recent government discussion paper, the cost at the moment to redesign or reconfigure vehicles coming into the Australian market is at least $30 million a year. So, I mean, it's an unnecessary and inefficient cost that the industry is having to bear at the moment. If we move to the broader width, then there's going to be a lot of advantages. Greater access to these low emission trucks. We want to see them coming into the market. Obviously, from the Australian industry's standpoint, what we want to be doing is contributing to better environmental outcomes. So we want to bring in vehicles that are newer and safer and which have a lot more safety equipment on them. If we can access that at a more effective cost without having to reconfigure, then obviously that will improve the uptake much more rapidly. And at the moment, what we're seeing is there's new models in the United States, 5 times the availability of low emission vehicles, number of models that we've got in Australia. Similarly, a much greater availability coming out of the European Union. We need to access those vehicles very quickly if we're going to improve performance and stay at the cutting edge in Australia. Then that's something that industry wants to get hold of.
How are the manufacturers and transport operators currently feeling? What are their feelings at the moment about this issue?
Well, look, I think obviously they're keen to play their role. There are great advantages at the moment. At the moment, we've got in place a very good incentive that the government has put in place with the ability to immediately write off new capital purchases. So if a trucking operator buys a new truck, within the next 12 months and installs it, then they can get an immediate capital write-off of that investment. So this is really sort of driving renewed investment in the industry, and that measure was extended for a further 12 months in the budget, which is a great thing. But if we want to take advantage of that and we want to access the best technology that we can and get the number of low emission vehicles, low emission trucks increased in the Australian marketplace, because at the moment it's very limited. Well, then we really just need to make this simple rule change, and that's all it is really. It's a 10 centimetre difference in width, but it can make a very important difference.
Okay, and how could this technology improve driver behaviour overall?
Well, I think one of the things that's linked to all of this is access to improved safety technologies. So I think the sort of safety packages in terms of the different camera systems that are now available, and the different systems that will warn a driver if there's a vehicle or something in proximity to his or her truck. The lane keeping systems and lane departure warning systems, all of these sort of technologies, are now available. And if you're able to bring in, that sort of driver assist technologies, then it really will improve safety, because a lot of people are not aware of the blind spots that we have on a large vehicle. So just improving the safety around any interaction between a large, heavy truck and a smaller passenger vehicle, that can't be all the responsibility of the truck driver. Car drivers and motorcyclists and cyclists have to be aware of the limitations that a heavy vehicle has. So that's part and parcel of it. But anything you can do to improve the information systems that a truck driver has at their disposal will obviously improve safety outcomes. So I think it's safety, it's environmental performance, it's productivity, it's all of those things. There's a lot of reasons to make a very simple rule change here to get much better outcomes, and it's saving money, it's saving the environment, and it's saving lives.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's a win-win-win that we just have to take, really.
For sure. Now, Andrew, Europe has 3 times the number of zero-emission truck models on the market compared to Australia, with the US 5 times more. Just how far behind is Australia? Even if we embrace all of this in the near future, how far behind are we?
Well, at the moment, very limited availability. I think at the moment there's only really 3 models that are just coming into the Australian market, rigid trucks. But the sooner we make this rule change, then we can start to access a lot of these other models that are coming onto the market in the United States in particular, both rigid trucks and the multi-combination vehicles and so on. So that really opens things up. I think it makes it much more feasible that we can start to grow the number of models and the uptake as people are buying new vehicles for their fleets going forward. So, it's really in its infancy at the moment. But I think if we can make a simple rule change, then what we will see is that the availability of these models in the Australian market will grow, I think, quite rapidly.
And why now? Why not earlier? Why not last year or the year before?
Well, I mean, look, it's an emerging area of development. I'm not sure that there's a particular logic behind why it's now and not last year, but the reality is the opportunity's in front of us. So, we should take that opportunity. We should make a simple change in the regulations. It's one of the options that government has identified. So all we would say is, look, take the advantage now. There's an opportunity to do something. It's a very, there's really no cost to it. It's benefit. It's all upside. I don't think people should be, put off by misinformation in this regard. It's going to make the operation of trucks around our urban areas and on our major highways safer. It's going to increase productivity. Really, there are only benefits to it. I can't see that there's really any significant cost or downside. Yeah,
definitely. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time during your busy schedule. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. No problem at all. So thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity.
No worries. Meanwhile, the introduction of mandatory 3-day COVID testing for those moving in and out of Sydney's Fairfield area has led to disruptions within the supply chain industry. Those who travel out of the Fairfield local government area for work will need to get tested every 3 days, which according to Road Freight New South Wales is putting pressure on truck drivers. While supportive of the government's efforts in controlling the latest outbreak across Sydney, CEO Simon O'Hara is concerned about the financial burden that freight workers face. Here's more from him. Thank you so much for joining us today, Simon. Could you please explain to us what sort of an impact are these 3-day mandatory testings having for truck drivers across Sydney?
So the testing at the moment is a bit of a shambles because what you're seeing is really long lines in the Fairfield local government area where you've got people waiting 4, 5, 6 hours to get tested. I note that New South Wales government is bringing online more 24-hour testing facilities, but until they come on properly, and even then, I'd foresee that this is still going to be an issue within Fairfield. You're seeing effectively freight workers, including truckies and forkies and allocators and admin staff having to wait for half a day to be able to get tested. So we've got some policy solutions for this situation. We've got some remedies that we think would work, and one of our remedies would be that we set up a system where we've got flying squads of health workers that come in and do rapid tests of freight workers. So they come into the workplace, a transport company, and they test, and then they move on. Okay. And then you get your result back in a couple of hours.
So that's a couple of hours, okay. So how exactly are those freight movers and transport workers feeling at the moment?
So they're feeling under pressure. They're feeling like they've got to work, they've got to get tested, they've got to get their children educated at home. They're under pressure, they're feeling it, and they're doing longer hours. And the freight operators themselves are asking me the question, who's going to pay for this? Because if we've got truckies and others, the freight working cohort in the lines waiting to be tested, who's doing the work? So what you're seeing effectively is the heartland of New South Wales trucking and the supply chain and logistics being affected by this lockdown. So you've got Wetherill Park, you've got Smithfield just on the cusp there of Fairfield, and you've also got Eastern Creek. This is key for the Australian supply chain to keep operating effectively. And so if you're seeing these sorts of testing regimes going on, then you start fooling around a little bit with the supply chain threads which affect other parts. And so these companies have to get across borders. They've got to do it in a timely manner. You're seeing a lot of things being pushed up. So there's a lot of ambivalence as well as frustration.
And where to from here? So what are your suggestions?
So my suggestions are we look at a more effective way of testing freight workers. Freight workers are essential. They deliver the PPE to hospitals and our homes. They deliver the food on the shelves that we need to eat. And they're also delivering the vaccines that we need to be able to beat this COVID scourge. So from our perspective, we need to see flying squads come into transport companies within the Fairfield LGA to be able to rapid test, get it done so people can get on and do their jobs. That's the solution. That's what we need to do.
And what's the response to that been?
Look, to date, the government's been focused on trying to manage this issue. So we're waiting to hear back what government thinks of all of these things. We've got various proposals out there at the moment, but the beauty of ours is that it means that health workers come to a workplace for a short period of time, tests are done, then they move on and they go somewhere else. And these are professionals, they know what they're doing. We don't want to put freight workers at risk by waiting for 5 or 6 hours to go into a testing centre that's seen thousands of other people go in there for tests already. We don't want to put them at any risk because we need them to deliver the food, the vaccines and the PPE.
5 or 6 hours would pretty much be half their shift gone, wouldn't it?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And if you've got truckies who have to do long haul driving, then you're seeing real problems with being able to move product out of this state.
Mm. Thank you. Well, anything else you'd like to add?
Look, what we are doing at the moment as well is it's not just purely about the numbers of supply chain and all the rest of it. We also think that truckies need to be treated with respect. We're seeing some incidences where truckies are being refused the use of customers' toilets and service station toilets. I've gone out publicly and said I'll name and shame any company that does that to truckies, and I stand by that. It's important that customers realise that, like us, truckies have dignity, and we need to ensure that facilities are available and properly cleaned so that they can use the toilet. If you've driven for 8 hours and you've delivered the product, telling them to go to a local council is not good enough. We need to ensure that Portaloos are available and that sort of thing. So we need to ensure that there's some dignity in all of this.
Well, thank you for that insight and for speaking up. Much appreciated.
No worries. No, thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for your time.
No worries. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
See ya. Ciao.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us for this special news update. We'll see you next time.